Hello everybody! Today I'm going to show you how I turned this big thrifted shirt into a wrap dress. That's today on Refashioning with Rachel. First, while wearing the shirt, I made a mark where I wanted my waist to be. I wanted this dress to be high-waisted, so I made a mark just below my bust. And I cut off the bottom of the shirt at that point. I folded the top part of the shirt in half, making sure to carefully align the shoulder seams. And I folded a shirt that fit me well in the same way. I placed it on top of the thrifted shirt, lining up the shoulder seams to just where the sleeves began, and traced around it, adding 1 centimeter for seam allowance. It's okay at this point that the side seam ends up somewhat in the sleeve of the thrifted shirt, and it's also okay that there's a gap in the center front and back, which I neatened up with a straight edge. I cut along the side seams and the armhole seams, and also the neck hole. Then opening up the bodice, I found the center front and drew a straight line from each of the shoulder seams to the center front. And I cut that out. And flipped the bodice over to the back. And I cut off the extra fabric from the center back. Then with right sides together, I pinned along the center back and stitched that close, creating a new center back seam. I also did some stay stitching around the neck hole so that it wouldn't get all stretched out as I continued with the project. Here I'm sewing the center back using a zigzag stitch so that it would stretch with the fabric. And here I'm stay stitching the neck hole and the front opening. I'm using a straight stitch and sewing close to the edge, about 1/2 centimeter or 2/8 of an inch away from the edge. I used to think stay stitching was just for perfectionists, but it turns out it makes a big difference in wrap dresses. Moving on to the sleeves, I placed the sleeve of my fitted shirt on top of the sleeve of my thrifted shirt, lining up the folds, and traced around the seams, adding 1 centimeter for seam allowance. And cut that out. And used that piece to cut out a second one from the other sleeve. I cut in 2 tiny notches to mark the center of the sleeves and opened up the bodice so that the armhole was lying flat. With right sides together, I pinned the sleeve to the armhole, lining up the center of the sleeve with the shoulder seam, and then working my way from each end of the armhole back up to the center. I continued pinning the sleeve to the armhole. And did the same thing on the other side. When everything was pinned, I took it to the sewing machine and stitched it in place. With the sleeves sewn in, I folded up the bodice with right sides together and pinned along the underarm seam and the side seams. And then I sewed the underarm seams and the side seams all in one go, starting at the sleeve so that I could make sure the hem was perfectly aligned. This way I can just keep the hem that was originally on the thrifted shirt. Moving on to the bottom of the shirt, I cut it open along one of the sides and made a gathering stitch all along the top edge. That is just a straight stitch on the longest setting, making sure not to go backwards and forwards to lock in the stitch at either end. I made a mark in the center of the skirt to help me line everything up, and pulled on one of the threads of the basting stitch until the skirt was gathered up to about the same width as the bodice. Then with right sides together, I pinned the bodice to the skirt. And then sewed them together. At the sewing machine, I took a little bit more time to evenly distribute the gathers. After the skirt was attached, I could remove the remaining basting stitch. Then I made a hem all around the opening of the dress. I did this simply by folding over the raw edge once and securing with a zigzag stitch. When I worked around the neck hole, the straight stitching that I made earlier was handy in preventing the hem from getting stretched out. With my scraps of fabric that I had from the center front and back of the bodice, I cut out as many 1-inch strips as I could, and attached them all end to end until I had one long strip that was about the length of my waist and another one that was about the length of 1.5 times my waist. Then I folded each strip in half lengthwise and made a stitch about 1/2 centimeter away from the folded edge. I turned these tubes of fabric right side out by putting some thread through an embroidery needle and tying a knot at the end, then putting the needle into the end of the strip and catching the knot, and then feeding it into the tube backwards and scooching it down all the way to the end of the tube. And gently pulling on the fabric until it turned right side out through the tube. And then I had 2 ties for my dress, which I pinned and then sewed to the opening of the dress at the waistline. On the side of the dress that had the shoulder strap, I used my seam ripper to open up a little hole in the side seam, and then sewed a little box around it to secure it. And then this project was finished. So here's a reminder of how this shirt looked before. And this is how it looks now. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe if you did, and check out some of my other refashioning videos. And have a beautiful day.